Why is it the case that diets fail then? And what's the percentage success of a typical diet?
Well, it's interesting. Something like 6 out of 7 dieters lose weight. Losing weight isn't hard. Keeping it off is hard. So long-term dietary adherence is what we like to measure. And the main reason that people regain the weight, as I mentioned, is hunger. They just stop adhering to the diet. They go back to their old habits. They start over-consuming, and generally that food is the ultra-processed, hyper-palatable foods. And that is where none of us are any more successful than the other. This is a whole conversation unto itself, really, that all of us in our diet tribes, I have a named diet, the vertical diet. There's a whole host of people out there that claim that they're, whether it's intermittent fasting or keto or you name it, none of us are any more successful than the other long-term. There's been tons of studies on thousands of people for a year, 2 years. None of us can claim to have the answer to this problem. Some of these ultra-processed, hyper-palatable food manufacturers are probably just laughing because we're all sitting around the table. There was an old Warner Brothers, was it Warner Brothers? It was a cartoon when I was a kid. The ants were fighting over a cake. And there was a cherry on top, and you had the red ants and the black ants were up there, and they were drawing around the cherry to see who was going to keep the cherry, and they'd erase it, and the other guy would erase it. And they got this great big fight, and then the picnickers came back, picked up their cake, and walked away while these guys were all fighting. I feel like those ants in this war on obesity.
I was going to say, do you feel like there is a battle going on between the designers of food and the people who want to remain healthy?
That battle is for money. That battle is for investors. That battle is to sell more food. That's what their job is as a corporation. And they'll design and sell and market the most effective way for their business to profit, not in the most effective way to help people with their long-term health and stave off obesity. While we're arguing about the best diet, it doesn't seem to matter. We all have our own list of testimonials. I'll say something about the carbohydrate insulin model, but I'll go on to Jason Fung's YouTube, and there's a whole bunch of people talking about how when they cut out carbs, they lost weight and they feel great. But in fact, everybody has testimonials. The vegan community has testimonials. The carnivore community has testimonials. I post testimonials all the time. It hasn't had an impact on our obesity crisis, cheap, affordable, ultra-processed, hyper-palatable food. So it's bigger than all of us because none of us have any influence on that whatsoever. That companies that are manufacturing and distributing this food, that's going to take a larger intervention like it did with smoking.
What is the relationship between sleep and weight loss?
One, when you don't get sufficient sleep, you have increased ghrelin release, which makes you hungrier, makes you want to eat more. You also have compromised insulin sensitivity, which makes it a little easier for you to gain weight.
You've mentioned insulin sensitivity a couple of times today. Just high level, what's that?
Yeah, we would say pre-diabetic or diabetic. It's that when you eat foods, your blood sugars elevate and there's no place to store them because you're over fat. Your fat stores are full, and so you can't put those there. Your muscles maybe don't have sufficient muscle mass to store that there, and then that stays elevated. Sleep does affect insulin levels as well. We also find that people who don't get sufficient sleep, when they start losing weight, they might lose disproportionate amount of muscle as opposed to fat. The body becomes stingy at preserving the fat. And so those are all things that can happen. Just being awake more hours in the day gives you another opportunity to get hungry and eat. Sleep through one meal and you're probably better off. Whole host of benefits from getting sufficient sleep.
Would you say that sleep is more important than cardio for fat loss?
Well, I did put it this way once. I said if you're waking up at 4 a.m. to do your fasted cardio after only 5 hours of sleep, you're stepping over $100 bills to pick up nickels. And that's been something I've said for many years. If somebody had, to me, I would do the cardio later. Or I don't even really recommend cardio at all to most of my clients because it's a pretty significant departure from their standard lifestyle, and it might not be something they enjoy. It might not be very sustainable, and we see it has diminishing returns over time as your body kind of adapts to that stimulus and becomes more efficient and reduces the calorie it burns. And another thing is that too much exercise activity, particularly aggressive exercise activity, I'm not shitting on any of these forms. If the best exercise is the one you'll do, if you enjoy doing it, do it. But if somebody starts crushing themselves, I call it battle ropes and burpees, thinking that they're going to burn calories just, for fat loss, a phenomenon called compensation takes over, where you just go home and sit more and eat more because you're hungry. You're tired.
And you earned it.
Hey, and you can burn 300 calories in one of those battle rope and burpee episodes, and you can go home and have one piece of bread and negate all of your gains or losses. I'm cautious about prescribing cardio for weight loss for all of those reasons.
Prescribe an extra hour's sleep instead.
I'd prescribe an extra hour's sleep and more non-exercise activity. I just think that the barriers to entry, having to come home, get in your car, drive to the gym, do your cardio, especially if you got a family and a career, that's the first thing that gets sacrificed best in that scenario. That's why I love the 10-minute walk, because they're more convenient, more sustainable. I can attach them to an existing behavior, which, as we know, increases the likelihood that that new behavior will become a habit.
What do you think are the main causes of the obesity epidemic? Why is it that the average American's got so much fatter over the last few decades?
I want to talk about what we see as probably what the academic community's consensus is. I'm kind of a collator of information as a personal trainer for 30 years, and I want to deliver that information to my clients and make sure it's evidence-based. And so I'll refrain from opinions. I've tried that in the past. So at the core of it all, we're consuming more calories than we used to 50 years ago. We know that from all the research. And the majority of those calories, the cause of that seems to be hyperpalatable ultra-processed foods. And it seems to have interfered with our ability to become satiated. And so we're eating too much. And we're in this food environment where that's really easy to do. And so it really is calories. And I know that sparks a whole bunch of bad feelings from folk. It kind of gets you those straw man arguments about keto, calories in, calories out, it doesn't work and all of that. But it's more complex than that. I've said move more, eat less is truthful, but not useful.
Necessary, but not sufficient, perhaps?
Yeah, it is what's happening and it is the solution. It's simple, but it's not easy. And so there's a whole host of factors I think we can dive into on that. But the fact of the matter is, it is calories. Keto is an oversimplification. It's actually an energy balance equation that accounts for all of these variables, which we may talk about. The total daily energy intake minus the total daily energy expenditure. And there's a whole host of things that go into both sides of that equation that really that goes into weight gain.
Why is calories in, calories out, and diet fads and discussions in general so emotionally charged? I would think that this would just be, I'm not calling you a good or a bad person. There's no reason for you to believe that you are anything. This isn't a comment on you, and yet diet discussions online are some of the most virulent and aggressive that you see.
They really are. I think part of it might just be that we want to pin the tail on the donkey, find one single source that maybe is something that we could fix. If we just got rid of it, carbohydrate insulin model spawned from that, where if you eat a grape and your insulin goes up, that you're going to gain fat and you can't lose fat. Demonizing certain foods became very popular. A lot of that going on, whether it's fructose or seed oils or anything that might correlate with overconsumption. When you talk about calories in, calories out, it seems to blame the victim, the individual who's having a hard time losing weight. You blame them. You're overeating, you're lazy, you're undisciplined, that kind of thing, without paying attention to all the other factors that go into that.
I suppose that calories in, calories out, when you fold in how hyperpalatable these new foods are, it's not putting all of the blame at the feet of the victim. This is a relatively unfair battle because of how well engineered these foods are for you to overeat. Now, ultimately, it's you that put it in your mouth, but it is a more difficult uphill climb.
Agreed. And another problem is that while we have a genetic predisposition, obviously now we're starting to see that certain people have different hunger signaling,
ghrelin release,
leptin sensitivity or lack thereof, and certain people, while we don't believe their basal metabolic rate is significantly different, we do see that some people are more active, what we call non-exercise activity thermogenesis, than others. My son and daughter's like that. My son, you have to almost check and see if he's breathing when he's sitting there watching TV sometimes. And my daughter can't sit down, and she's humming all the time and tapping her toes, and two very different movement patterns. And people with high non-exercise activity thermogenesis can burn over 1,000 calories a day more than somebody with low non-exercise activity thermogenesis. We see that in active individuals versus, say, sedentary jobs versus, say, a construction worker or a waitress as opposed to a desk worker. So we see a lot of calories can be accounted for in that component of the equation, the energy balance equation. So those things all play into it. And then there's also a big social component to talk about. Some folks in lower socioeconomic environments are exposed to more of this hyperpalatable ultra-processed food from an earlier age. Very affordable, it's very convenient and accessible, and that has a huge impact.